Due to the vacation of the chair by Councillor Webber, I'm looking for nominations from the floor for a chair for our meeting today.
Can I nominate this, please?
Excellent. All in favour?
Lovely. Thank you. I've got a hospital call this morning at some stage, and I don't want to miss it. Thank you.
Let's see. Okay, morning everybody. Sorry, it always takes a few minutes to get your computer back up and operating. So look, welcome to the Service Delivery Committee for the 17th of August. And thank you for the nomination to chair the meeting. Thanks, Graham. Okay, first of all, we'll call for apologies. I think we're full house today, so no apologies. Any disclosure of members' interest this morning? Nothing on the agenda. Excellent. Any late items? Good. We'll move on to the confirmation of order of the meeting. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Lou. All in favour? Carried. Okay. Right. Okay, we've got confirmation of the open minutes, of course. Now, this was back on Tuesday, the 15th of June, was our last service delivery meeting. Any changes, amendments? We've taken a couple of spelling errors, I think, from you, Claire. So thanks for that. Really appreciate that. Any other changes? No, I'll ask for a move and a second then, please, for the confirmation of those minutes. Thank you, Roger. Thank you, Marcus. All in favour? Carried. All right, we've got contracts signed under delegation this morning, and we have Brian. I think, are you going to be doing this for us?
No,
no,
I'll speak to that one.
But you're going to do that one?
Yep.
Thanks,
no,
Dawn.
so we've just got the single contract that we awarded last month. That work is fully funded, partially funded through the DIA stimulus funding. It's the upgrading of our SCADA system and telemetry, which is the notification from each of our plants and pump stations back to a central system. So the system we had was quite aged, so we've taken the opportunity to do that. And yeah, Arthur D. Riley are a well-experienced team working with us to deliver that project.
Thank you, Graham. No discussion. Okay, Andrew's going to second the motion. All in favour? Carried. Thank you, everybody. Right, Brian, now you're up. Transportation report. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll take my report as read. There's quite a bit of information in there, but just onto the first page, there is a list there of projects for this coming year. So we've identified some road reconstruction projects that we're designing, the resurfacing limits, seal extension. I did get a list of questions from a councillor that I'll just quickly run through because those questions and answers will be of interest probably to the wider group. That Te Pahu rehabilitation is north of Clovier Road for just over 1 kilometre. Low road seal extension, so we weren't able to complete that last year because of a failure of our contractor to resource that. So we've put it forward as a carry forward, and staff do that, and it's over to the wider finance team and exec to approve carry forward. So we put forward the case. But I'm not, but I am hopeful that that will be approved and we'll be able to do that. The Mangapiko stream footbridges that are going in. So the first one that was lifted into place last week is 3 metres wide and suitable for pedestrians and cyclists. The one across Chanel Place is 2.5 metres wide, and that matches the width of the walkway behind the houses. And then the other two in the park that are proposed will be 2.5 metres wide also for pedestrians and cyclists. Then there was a question about the Haupo pedestrian crossing in the middle of the township, and has there been any community consultation on that yet? At this stage, there hasn't been any community consultation. We've met with the owners of the hotel there as they're directly affected by the proposal. But we prepared a concept plan that we've shared with the Transport Agency as the road controlling authority to get their preliminary approval. And so we're now preparing a plan that we can take to the community over the next 1 to 2 months. But the proposal is for a central crossing there in the middle of town, which will protect pedestrians.
And on that, any chance of seeing that concept plan, if you could share it with us, councillors, especially those in your ward that
Yes.
are pretty interested in it.
Yeah,
But it's
that's
great to hear that there will be community consultation.
Yeah, that's right. We'll certainly do that, but probably just keep it to yourselves at this stage because it is just a preliminary plan. There's still stuff to be worked on, and we don't want to go off half-cocked and not have the correct information for the public.
Brian, just a question on that. So I guess that township has been hopeful for a pedestrian crossing for some time. So when we do the public consultation, what it does is it gets the community's hopes up. And I'm just wondering with Waka Kotahi, if it's going to take 10 years or 20 years to actually do the work, are we timing the consultation? And is now the right time? And if your indicators are that actually the work's going to be done.
Yeah. So
within 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
I can understand that.
Yeah. So we've had a discussion with the safety engineering department of Waka Kotahi, and they seem to be in agreement with us that it's the right type of crossing and in the right location. We do have to have a bit more of a discussion with their operations team who maintain the highway, because we know they've got plans to replace curbs and pavement and everything there. But we know that funding is constrained within Waka Kotahi, and that it may be difficult for them to fully partner with us to deliver it. But we do have our budget in the LTP to be able to progress the works on our own if need be, as long as we get all of their approvals. Okay. So, but yeah, certainly mindful, we don't want to take something to the community that we're not able to deliver. So having that assurance before we go is our plan. Yeah. And then there was a question about street lighting and delivering lighting improvements in Pollard Drive. So that's our top priority for this year. And we are just waiting on Waka Kotahi to announce our capital funding budget, which they'll do at the end of this month or early in September. They've told us not to expect to be fully funded for all of the works that we've asked for. So we'll have to see what they fund and then how that's divided up amongst the various improvement works that we had planned in the LTP for the next 3 years.
Okay. On that, Brian, because I know that the Te Awamutu Community Board's been pretty keen to see something done without any delay. How much, like have you done an analysis of how many extra lights would be needed in that place area? Because one of the reasons for the priority is, the serious crime and violence that's happening there. Yeah, so have you worked out how many more lights that would be needed to rectify it and how much that might cost?
Yeah, so the existing lights are on short columns and well spaced apart. So virtually we've got to double the number of lights and put them onto taller columns. So there's probably around $80,000 worth of work to do that. There's a couple of streets and cul-de-sacs in that area. Yeah. Okay.
Philip, yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian. That funding from NZTA, could that potentially affect the development of the cycle routes through Cambridge that we've been discussing with Streets for People and urban mobility and things?
Yes, it is all capital improvement works, and we've sought over the 10 years just over $5 million from Waka Kotahi to support those works. So at 51% subsidy, that's a $10 million program over 3 years. So we are waiting, like all local authorities around the country, with bated breath to see what the outcome is of their funding decisions.
Clear.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Just back to the street lighting. So, and mentioning that you're not sure what level of funding you'll get from NZTA or Waka Kotahi. So is that going to put us in a difficult situation? You know, like, because I'm really keen to see some action on Pollard Drive, but I'm pretty stunned at the level of dollars that's needed. So you rely quite a lot on the Waka Kotahi funding, to do the work. Like it's almost fully funded, isn't it, from them for the street lighting?
Yeah, 51%.
51%.
The level. So they all fit under what's called the low cost, low risk improvement funding. So projects up to $1 million. And so we've applied for a whole series of different projects, whether it's school crossings or streetlight improvements or intersection improvements. And we've got a big list, about 3 years of works we'd like to do, and we just have to see what funding they'll provide. So we will have obviously the ratepayers funding that we've put forward, but if we don't get all of the money that the Transport Agency is we would have applied for, then we'll have to cut back the number of projects we can deliver.
Yeah. And so when it does come through, and if the Pollard Drive lighting is top of the list, like when could we expect to see something happening there?
I would hope that we would have new lights in place before Christmas this year.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
That's good.
So just moving down that list, 3.1, we just talk a little bit about maintenance work over the last few months. But under 3.2, there's questions raised about the CCTV service. And so that comes from both a meeting with ComSafe and police last month. And there were questions there, and I know that councillors around the table have got those same questions in mind. And there were questions around data retrieval. Does our system compress the data? And so when it's retrieved, is it of a lower standard? The answer is no, that the system does not compress the data. So it's recorded at 1080 resolution, just similar to a high definition TV. And it's played back at that same resolution or exported to disk if they need it for evidence. But what we do have is that many of our cameras are up high, surveying over a whole intersection area. And it's the same if on your high definition TV, if you had the ability to zoom in on a detail on your TV, you would see that that would become quickly pixelated because it's taking in that whole big image. So we know that if you want to reliably read a number plate of a moving vehicle as it rounds around an intersection or pulls up to an intersection, you need to have a camera that just focuses on that traffic lane, and it will see, then that number plate. So a different sort of camera is needed for that. But also the other sort of complaint we had, well, we've got a number of these cameras that are fixed, and so we can't actually rotate them. We can't zoom up to an activity that might be happening on a footpath. We can't zoom into a vehicle that's stopped in the middle of the road. And so there was, I guess, a conscious decision at the beginning of the project that we would have some PTZ cameras and we'd have some fixed cameras. When we went out to tender, we tendered on 19 cameras, but when the pricing came in, we could only afford to do 13 cameras. So there were decisions made around which cameras would be installed and which ones would have to wait for another day. For example, in Cambridge, we said when the Norfolk Drive intersection, the signals there are expanded and the new leg built into the west. At that time, we would put cameras at that intersection, including a number plate recognition camera to get vehicles coming into Cambridge off the expressway. So, there was a decision at the beginning there to delay some cameras until the future.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Roger. Yes.
Yeah, Brian, thanks for that. I appreciate the comments that you've just made. However, if we go back to the RFP, which was really the very basis, we actually did set minimum expected performance of the system. And there were only two sub notes in there. And one of them was that the identification of details, vehicle plates and persons. Now, what I'm hearing is that that functionality is not achieved by what we've put in. So why did we not stick to the original requirements of the RFP?
Yeah, and there's a lot of misunderstanding around that, Roger. There's, I've got the original requirements of the RFP here, and so we knew there would be some PTZ cameras. So that relies on then the operator being able to zoom in and follow an activity and be able to get more detail. Because the PTZ cameras do have an optical zoom of 30 times, so they will get a lot of detail if they're being controlled and zoomed to features. But like I said, we also knew we couldn't afford to do everything we wanted to do. So we have got 2 number plate recognition cameras, both in Te Amutu, one at Alexander Street and one at Benson Road, and they do reliably pick up number plates. But we do not have the ability, well, and there's a couple of other places where we get number plates most of the time, which is at the end of the Victoria Bridge on the roundabout there with the cameras looking at the small roundabout. So we did get quite a bit of what we asked for, and there's some things that we didn't get because we didn't have the budget to do all of the cameras we wanted. And we made a conscious decision when we were analysing the tender. So Doug McCormick, who helped write the specification, he did a lot of the backwards and forwards with Datacom in terms of negotiating the changes that would be made and coming up with what was acceptable at the time in terms of the compromises we had to make.
What you're telling me is that there was a conscious decision to modify the requirement to install camera units which were not fit for the original purpose.
No, you're
that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, you're misunderstanding. So there was a conscious decision that the system as a whole does everything that will be able to do everything that we wanted to, but because of our budget limitations, we had to drop out some cameras. So we, or change some types of cameras. So we are missing some of the functionality we would ideally like, but we knew that in the future, we would assign a budget and we would keep installing additional cameras and getting to where we'd like to be.
I'm just wondering whether that decision, because it was a major decision that was agreed by council, if we weren't able to meet that RFP, whether that decision should have been brought back for discussion at council, rather than the decision made to install either insufficient units or units that were not going to meet the initial RFP that we'd agreed to.
I guess I beg to differ. It does meet many of the requirements, and we knew we had the ability to expand it to fulfill more of them. So, to be fair, we were using the system well for 12 months, and then the ComSafe people got their volunteers organised and started monitoring, and then started to identify some of the things they would like it to do in places that they had said, we'd like to expand the system here and here to get the additional cameras or additional PTZ cameras in place. And we've made the undertaking as budget becomes available to do that. So it's a work in progress, but we are on the right track to get it to where we need it to be.
Thanks, Brian. Hey, I'll step in there because we do have ComSafe coming to speak with us a little bit later on this afternoon, who are quite involved, well, not this morning, I should say. Hey, but just on this as well, for those of you that are not aware, so I guess what we are seeing now is a call from our community that they would like to expand the service, and they would like to see council turning their attention to it. So there is a second meeting with the police, with ComSafe and interested community members on the 15th of September. So we can continue to delve into the detail, because I think that's what the community, in particular the police, are looking for, is what are the next steps, where are we going with this, and what budget can we look to in the future. So I'll leave it at that, if that's right with everybody, and because we will be speaking about it this afternoon. Sure.
Quick one. Brian, I find that the cost for the $75,000 for communications and licenses and camera maintenance, I think that's like, to me, that looks real high. I'm wondering, can we get a breakdown on like what those components are? Because that's quite a lot of money to pay for a camera system.
Yeah. So I think roughly half of that $75,000 is paid to Vocus, because we have sort of high in-service fibre connection. So, you know, it's guaranteed that its level of service doesn't diminish. So you may know, like if you're at home and you're all streaming stuff from your home fibre system.
Yeah,
So
can we have a breakdown of that cost? Because we're quite nice. I'd
Yes.
quite like to see like what plans are on, because I deal with
Yep.
Vocus every day.
yeah,
And that just seems to be like a ridiculously high price for the service that can be delivered. But I'd just like to see like why.
No,
what it
happy
is.
to share that detail with you.
And everybody, look, I'm sure this will be back on the agenda again next month, once we've had our meeting, and we can continue to delve into the detail, as I mentioned earlier. So Brian, would you like to carry on with your report?
So there at item 3.3, we have some photographs of the Hamilton Road cycleway being built. So the actual cycleway itself now is sort of complete end to end. And we're just working on those signals installation at Grey Street. So I was over there on Sunday, and cyclists are actually using it now up and down there. So it's looking good.
Yes, Mike. Yes.
Just through the chair, just a clarification. Grey Street, so that's pretty much where the lights are going in. And so there's a dairy just down the road there. And this must have slipped my memory, but going from Hamilton to Cambridge, you cannot exit, you cannot enter Grey Street to the right. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah, right. So, all right. So, yeah, I just thought that we were, but that was my mistake. But there's some noise in the community about that dairy and the obvious impact, which I hope we did talk about around the table, because they're going to lose a lot of business. So, just any thoughts there, or I guess communication that we've had with them as a council with that dairy.
Yeah, certainly we've had several meetings with the dairy owner. So back in November last year, before the project was, got underway. So there was consultation meetings actually in his store with him. He came to the open day at the Cambridge Middle School, and we talked through the likely impacts and effects and everything. And then, of course, he took a petition in his dairy, which was part of the feedback consultation to council in February, where we made the final decisions around the final form of it. And at that stage, obviously, council approved leaving an exit open, so there was still some through traffic on Grey Street, which would be able to make trips past the dairy. So that was the compromise to keep some traffic flowing.
An exit from Grey Street into,
Yes.
yeah, that was it. Yep, right. Thanks for that.
Okay, any other discussion on that? No, we'll keep moving. Thanks, Brian.
Okay, then there's a few photos of the Te Awa cycleway, which is slowed down a bit through the winter time because of wet weather, but we've used helicopters to lift boardwalk materials into the wetter parts, and the contractors are continuing to build there. Within the Bodle property, we did uncover some archaeological remains there of post holes and trenches and obsidian fragments and things like that. It is in a known archaeological area with a site not far away from that. So we were expecting it to be quite possible we would find things. And that's been all duly recorded and covered over with sand to protect it underneath the concrete path. I've listed there in 3.5 some of the footpath works planned in the short term, and we'll be expanding that list in the next report with other streets that are to be done. Then a quick discussion there. The next part is the road safety. So our community road safety plan. Waka Kotahi have confirmed a slightly reduced budget for the next 3 years in that area, and Megan Jolly there has listed the activities that will be undertaken.
Sorry, just a clarification around the footpath maintenance. Are we just making those footpaths the same size, Brian, or are we extending them out to a larger width?
Yep. In most cases, when we're renewing footpaths, we're going to a wider width. There are some where they're just, a short length of footpath into a cul-de-sac. It's currently 1.5 metres. We'll put it back at 1.5. But most of the others on any more significant street, they're going back wider. Yep.
Yes.
In terms of the discovery protocol on those findings, so you
Yes.
advise mana whenua.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's the first call, is to, and there have been, through that project, whenever they're stripping topsoil, the iwi monitors have been there on the job. Yeah. So under Megan's report, we do have obviously the police billboards that are up around the district now, sending the message to drive safely. We've run the fatigue stop as we do normally each year in Prongia. Under 3.8 passenger transport, so there's some good news there. We have got the basic reporting working again now, and we hope to have more detailed reports that come from the electronic, swipe on, swipe off card, the B card, which will give us richer data. It has taken a while for the regional council to get their head around getting all of that data and getting their reporting working again. But the good news is for the last 12 months, we are back to where we were before COVID and slightly above, which indicates that, certainly within Waipa anyway, people are back using the buses, and which is good.
Roger.
Yeah, I think that's great news that we've got that info coming back. You're saying that the retrospective information for the last year is available. Is it possible, because one of the interesting data sets that we had were the occupancy, the average daily occupancy on the different hourly timed trips, the 16 through the day. Is that available? Can we have a look at that? Or can you distribute that to us so we can see what kind of occupancy rates we're getting? And secondly, the most important, I think, to me, is the definition of the trip length and how many were actually taking that trip from Leamington to Cambridge rather than the full Hamilton. Yeah. So how many inter-trips for the Cambridge community we were getting. Is it possible to get that data out to us?
Yeah, I believe it is. We can't get it yet. So we've made that request to the regional council, and I think they're kind of, with all of the change that they've been through and getting the system working properly and reporting properly, they've been sort of snowed under. But we've put those requests and we keep bugging them, asking them when can we have it. But as soon as we do get it, we'll get it out to you. The other good news story there with Total Mobility. So this is our subsidised taxi service. We can see over the last 12 months that that's really starting to ramp up, which is great, because that means people with no other transport choice or a disability are able to, get those cheaper taxi service fares around our towns. So over 2,000 trips made in the last financial year, 2,200 trips, and that seems to be continuing to increase, which is great.
Philip.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No. Thank you. Just briefly, all those providers like To and Fro, which is Resthaven, and providers like that are all very busy, and occupancy is right up and actually making profit out of it. So that's good.
Great. Yep, that's what we want to see. We want to see more taxi services available in our towns through things like this, helping them out with a base load of customers. Yeah. So Sally here is giving quite a bit of detail about the waste minimisation activities. One of the highlights there at the beginning, where we've been audited by the Ministry for the Environment, and they've looked at our books and our program and what we've delivered and said, well done, you're doing a good job, and you've met all the compliance required for reporting and use of that funding. Very briefly, thank you. Just an email just here that's come from Keep New Zealand Beautiful, that urban miners have made the community award, the National Community Award for Keep New Zealand Beautiful. So
the awards evenings in October. Announcement will be in October.
Great, that's cool. Yep, excellent. And yeah, they're working into Tiamutu now as well with these collection points, so it's working well. Sally there lists the different activities. Obviously, she's been really busy through July with this plastic-free promotion, and the other things coming up there. Where you can see lots of information about the different activities. And I like the way she works with our comms team and puts it into graphics, so it's nice and easy to see the information. And the important point there at the moment, so obviously they've advertised and they've encouraged a lot of community groups to apply for funding, and they have got 13 applications in, and they're working through those now at the moment to divide up the funding that's available. So part 5 then, levels of service performance. So for the last 12 months, our recycling complaints stayed under the 144 for the year, or that's 12 a month, which is good. The recycling volumes, you'll see that they are down, and that is all around this contamination, and there's a paper coming up after this one around that contamination. As a transportation team, we didn't quite manage to meet our target of 90% of all service requests dealt with in under 10 days or investigated in under 10 days, but we got very close, and we know what we have to do to improve on that this year. So any other questions on that report? Otherwise, that one's done.
Roger.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. A couple of questions that actually aren't in the report, and I'm just wondering whether you could share information. There have been a couple of recent reports, whether you've received them yet or not, I'm not sure, on the examinations of the Victoria Bridge, like the surface and the structural,
yes, yeah.
When you had guys going down on ropes. Wouldn't have liked to have done that. But have you got those reports to hand yet?
No, not yet. Paul and I met with Becca, must be a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. And so they gave us a verbal update, and they're near complete. So we expect them anytime. And when they do arrive, I'll be able to send you a link to that and maybe the Friday mail out. But the verbal feedback is that the concrete deck is in reasonably good condition for its age, and it's not expected to cause us any troubles in the near future. And the structure itself, its structural capacity is okay as well. So again, we're not expecting any issues.
So you will be sending that out.
Yes, yeah.
And the second thing, which is kind of related to that, we've had some recent and very interesting traffic count figures, particularly outside of the BP and the 2 bridge numbers. Could you give us a report on what you're finding from those figures and what the trends of the increase is going to mean for our traffic network?
Yeah, we certainly can do that, do some analysis and provide a bit of a report for you. We're also, as to trends, it's interesting when you look back at the traffic counts over the 2 bridges in Cambridge over the years. Sometimes they're up and down, and you sort of wonder what's happening that would cause these variations. Some of the recent counts were done while the Streets for People project was still in place with the one-way on Duke Street. So that will have had a marginal impact on some of that. But what will also come out in the not too distant future will be our transport strategy, which is doing some modelling and looking at growth and expected growth in traffic over time as well, which will be interesting.
I think 2 points there. If you felt that there was a qualifying factor as to the numbers on the bridge and the BP count, had you not thought about doing another count just to validate whether there was a reason that those, because the traffic count on that Victoria Road, close to 25,000, is really well ahead of what it was prior to the expressway opening.
Yeah.
So that's a real concern.
Yes, and there's all sorts of potential reasons for that could be explored, but one will perhaps be that people make multiple trips around the two roundabouts, because if you're heading north and you want to go to the BP, you go up around the roundabout into the BP and then down and then up again. So you make multiple trips on that one section of road. So a lot of people will be doing that to access businesses along there. So it may not be, because we don't see those longer trips through the town increasing dramatically, the same level of increase. It could be more that local activity which is pushing up those trips. But yeah, without
I know that there
a
are
whole lot of
reasons that
analysis.
it's there,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, whatever the factors are, that traffic is still there.
Yes.
And I think you've accepted now that we've got congestion at those peak times of the day on that stretch of road. So it's really not going to get better than that. It's actually going to get worse as the population increases.
Hey, so thanks, Brian. Good to hear that we'll get an analysis report and agenda that at one of our next service delivery meetings. So I think that data will be really interesting, but more importantly, your analysis of it, I guess, is what we're interested in as well. So no, thanks for that. Thanks for that offer. Question?
Thank you. Bruntwood Road, the railway crossing there, there's temporary 30-kilometre signs there. What's the go there? And secondly, the intersection with Peak Road, Peak Road, what have you? You've got speed signage, electronic signage one way. Was it funding because we didn't have it the other way, and that's working really well? But yeah, just a couple of things.
Yep. So 2 issues. So we had a number of places this winter that caught us out with slippery road surfaces where people had crashes. So Te Pahu Road was one, Bruntwood Road by that railway crossing was another, and Waipapa Road was another. So we put up temporary signs, and we've also done water cutting. So they use a special machine to cut the bitumen off the surface of the road. And we've had to book in to get that machine to our district to do that work. So that's the reason for those signs and activities. And then the speed sign on Bruntwood Road, we analysed the crashes that were happening at that intersection, and it tended to be traffic that was heading away from Cambridge and traffic heading north on Peak Road that was crossing without giving way. That was the main causes of the crashes. So hence the measures that are there were designed to address those high risk approaches.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
A quick question.
Okay, Brian, can you just give us a quick update on the Waipapa Road, which has been of real interest to me? How are you getting on out there, and have you done some grooving on that road? The other thing I wanted to point out is I know there are rules through NZTA that you can only have temporary signs for a certain time. But the point on that road is we've had a death. The point is when Jenny and I came back in the heavy rain, there was 2 cars in the ditch. It is super slippery. And I say, bugger the rules if you're saving lives, if you're keeping that speed down. And I was shocked to see coming out from those signs that we were back on, you can go 100 Ks now. And the road wasn't fit in those conditions to do that. Can you just give us a brief update on how that's travelling?
Yeah, so initially, so we had the fatal crash, and we responded and put up quite a few slippery when wet signs, and we noticed and heard from the local people that people were still not slowing down, even though there were lots of signs there to say the road surface is slippery. So we took the next step to put in temporary speed restrictions, so we can hold those temporary speed restrictions there for a reasonable length of time. There's not an while that hazard exists under the rules, we can have them there. But obviously, putting up a sign does not remove all of the risk. So after some more crashes, we put up some variable message signs at each end, to really reinforce to people that, hey, this is an important message. And again, we've got that that water cutting machine going there. If it hasn't started already, then it will be there very shortly, treating that surface. So
is it a summer job to put some seal on that?
yes, either a new surface on top in places. Obviously, once we've water cut it, we've removed a lot of the bitumen, and sometimes the stone then starts to crumble and come out, and we need to reseal it, or we may need to reconstruct part of the road, rip it, and remake it.
Just for an update, that we're down to just tar. You're going on tar. There's no grit on those wheel tracks, and it's like an ice rink. Like an ice rink.
So Brian, I guess if there's any other informational questions about specific areas, you might be available at morning tea, perhaps,
Yes,
to
certainly.
answer some of those,
Yep.
if that's all right. So we've got a recommendation here to that the transportation report be received. Can I have a move in a second? Thank you, Philip. And Mike, all in favour? Carried, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the curbside recycling 3-month bin audit trial.
Right, thank you.
Yours again.
Mine
Thanks, Brian.
again, yes. My staff said to me, Brian, while you're there. So,
Excellent idea.
So you'll all be aware from previous reports of the contamination in the recycling, which has meant that we've had to send a lot of this material to landfill. That's both glass and the mixed recycling. So we, undertook a bit of a financial or cost assessment of what would that do, longer term if we couldn't arrest this trend, and ran this trial whereby 2 full-time inspectors were out there every day in front of the truck, lifting bin lids and raking material in the bins to find out where the contamination was. So they've, since mid-April to mid-July, they have looked into over 10,000 bins, and of the mixed bins and nearly 1,500 glass recycling bins. The results there are in the executive summary and in the graphs at the back, but nearly 90% of bins were compliant. Then you have a little bit of minor non-compliance where it's often just a simple mistake. This plastic tray, it looks like it's got a number 1 on it, but I'm not sure. I'll stick it in anyway, and then it's not recyclable. So there's a bit of that, but 10% of the bins contain rubbish that should not have been there. And common items, people get takeaways with pizza, and then they throw the pizza box in the bin, and it's still full of cheese and fat and bits of food and stuff like that. That just cannot be recycled. So that's really common, those takeaway type boxes that people think it's made of cardboard. There's a bit of paper in it. It's a paper cup, but it's got a plastic lid attached and a straw. None of those things are recyclable, so they should not be there. But worse than that, we have those rat bags in the community who are just treating it like their rubbish bin. So it's full of nappies and food waste and batteries and gas bottles and all sorts of crazy stuff that you just would not expect a reasonable person to put in their bin. So those ones do get that serious warning. Hey, this is gross contamination. You cannot let this happen again. Don't make that mistake. And then the auditors would go back to those properties every time over the next few collections to make sure that it wasn't reoccurring. But where people were still being lazy or stupid, a number of those services were stopped and will continue to be stopped as we find those people. So it has made a difference. We have seen that this auditing has reduced the contamination over that period. And now we've got to do a bit of a debrief with the contractor and see from their perspective, how well did it work? How productive were they in terms of getting around the district? There's obviously, people put their bins out first thing in the morning, so the auditors are starting real early and they're trying to get to as many bins before the truck catches up to them. And obviously in the rural area where bins are much further apart, that's harder to do. So we'll look at just how well it worked, whether the paper, recording could be replaced with some sort of electronic system that will make it quicker and easier. But it certainly seems to me to be cost effective to have some more intensive auditing than the basic system that is specified under the contract. So it does mean some additional cost, but it should ultimately be a saving to the community as a whole in the future. But we want to do that extra analysis and bring back a report to you and a recommendation of how we proceed from here.
Thanks, Brian. Questions, Claire?
Yeah, Brian, I'm really concerned with the whole viability of the project, even though, you know, it's got really laudable aims to provide us recycling service, you know, to our community. But if it's going to be abused in this way to such a point where the operating costs are going to be increased so much, yeah, I'm really concerned with what it's looking like. Yeah, like when it got set up, it was about $1 million, you know, that we needed to fund a year. But now, you know, these additional costs are increasing it by at least 30% a year, if not more.
Yeah. Yeah, you're quite correct, and you know, we share that concern. We want a viable service that sustainable for council, sustainable for contractors too, because there's, you know, high risks for them, and you know, when you look at the impacts on their staff and health and safety and everything like that. You know, we had that incident where somebody put a battery into the recycling bin and it caught fire in the shed. If that had caught fire when there were no staff around, then the shed could have been just a, you know, a pile of cinders. So there are some risks there if we don't get people operating well.
Absolutely, I'm right behind you on that. I was wondering whether or not that resource centre that we've, you know, given the go-ahead for in the LTP, whether or not that might provide an alternative way of getting recycling sort of, I suppose, processed. So not necessarily using a curbside collection, but where people could actually take it to that centre or something, which would give you more control over when it's delivered, yeah, what's there, and how it's processed. But I guess it's still quite early days. Have you given any thought to that?
Yeah, I know that some cities, they will have their transfer stations set up so that you can drive in, you unload all your recyclables first, and it all goes into, you know, big cages so everyone can see what you're putting in there. And then they often have space also in them where things that are used goods but still got a life, or it might be dropping off your electronic, you know, the old computer that doesn't work. So they collect all of that, and then what you're left over with, you drive over a weighbridge and you dump it. So, you know, that's probably the ideal, but you are talking, you know, who knows, 10 or $15 million worth of investment to have a facility like that.
Okay, Susan, and then Bill, and then Roger.
Thanks, Brian. Just a couple of questions. How many people are on the naughty list? And do they ever get back on the good list? And did we ever, I'm assuming, and I began to announce this one, but the rates of contamination have skyrocketed since we've migrated from the crate scenario, haven't they? And are we assuming that's because people can hide their waste?
Yes, yeah, it is. It was sorted at the curbside once, you know, with the crate. The driver would get out and put the bottles in their correct places, and the paper here and the plastics there. And when it's hidden in the bin, you don't see that. So, yeah, that's certainly part of the problem. But interestingly, when you look at it, you know, 90% of the community, they want to do the right thing. They take, you know, so, and often if they get a warning and find out they've been doing it wrong, they're, you know, shocked and surprised, and they're, you know, upset that they've made a mistake, because the majority really want to do the right thing. And it is just those rat bags who are spoiling it, you know, for the rest of the community. So yes, I think there are some numbers in the report here. I couldn't just put my finger on it straight away, but there's numbers there of people who've lost the service. And I think in the future, when we've done a bit more analysis, there will be more that will lose their service as well. But oftentimes they do not come back to us and say, I want my service restored. They know they've been rat bags, and they, for whatever reason, don't come and ask for the service to be restarted. But there is a process. If they sign a pledge and say, yes, I understand I've made mistakes, I promise to use the service responsibly in the future, then it will be returned. But as I say, that I think is rare that has happened.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, Bill.
Yeah, Brian, I just have a concern about calling ratepayers and residents rat bags. I can understand and I can see the frustration from staff, But I do wonder about whether, you know, the word that Susan used, naughty or non-compliant, would be a better way of describing these people. So, yeah, and I, you know, picked that up because you used it 3 times just then before I had an opportunity to raise it with you. So I totally understand, and you know, they're obviously very annoying to the staff, but I don't know in this forum that we should be describing them that way. But,
Thanks,
fair
Bill. Point
call.
noted.
I'll take that.
Roger, and then Lou.
I was actually going to use the same word, so I'll change it to naughty people. And, you know, the question of whether we do curbside or whether we do a recycling centre, there are still going to be those naughty people that are not concerned about what they do with their rubbish. And, you know, what's the alternative? We'll end up with a higher occurrence of fly tipping, you know, and some of the areas in our community where we get rubbish appearing because people can't be bothered to dispose of them in other ways. So, yeah, I don't know how you deal with the naughty people, but that's the challenge, isn't it? So I don't think it's a system, it's the naughty people that we've got to deal with.
I know, yeah, so certainly we are collecting a lot of fly tipping, and a lot of our rural roads around Hamilton City, we have a great deal of fly tipping that we pick up there, but it happens all around the district. I know that some cities are rolling out a more comprehensive waste service, I guess. So they're going for the food waste, then they have a small rubbish bin, which is collected once a fortnight, and then they have the recycling bins as well. So, you know, households end up with 4 bins, but I think it is in an attempt to try and provide a comprehensive service so there's less likelihood of people using the services wrongly. And so I think there is merit in that, but it does come with some costs.
Thanks, Brian. And last question, Lou. Oh, and burning one.
Yes, thank you, Brian. I agree with you with the fly tipping, and we've actually had a serious incident in the street that I live in, where an elderly widow suddenly found her yellow bin a lot fuller than it was before. And it was pizzas, by the way, too, half-eaten pizzas. So these things do happen. However, I just want to bring the point to you that I see that the monitoring system cost us for 2 persons for the 3 months, $16,800 odd, and yet we sent away $25,000 worth to a landfill. Now, remembering that landfill charges are going to go up quite exponentially in the near future. So that figure for a landfill will continue to increase. So is there any benefit of continuing with the role of having people monitoring this? Because I've seen the people actually at the other end, been down with Sally and watched down on Benson Road, how they actually have to sort, and quite, you know, stand in amazement how much they do get through in a day. But contamination is to them a major fault too, and a problem for them.
Yeah. So
I'm just wondering whether we could look at the validity of having our contract to look at that way until we get a suitable digital system.
yeah, yeah. Well, certainly that's the next step here, is to examine, you know, the pros and cons, the costs, and the way it's done. Can we make it faster, more efficient? And but yeah, it does seem to me merit that we keep up some form of auditing.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. And Mike, did you have a question?
Yeah, through the chairs to comment, it's a positive comment about the corner of Mangakawa Road there. Sorry. The signage, etc., that's gone up with, I mean, it's not so much fly tipping, it's the dumping of illegal bags, but just the impact that that whole campaign has made was brought to the community board about 3 years ago, so it's taken a little while to get a good result. But last week I noticed there was only 1 bag there. It wasn't picked up, and a couple of days later, hopefully the owner took it away, it was gone again. So these measures do impact the community. It does take time, but people do learn that actually they have to change their habits. So yeah, well done there.
Excellent news. Okay, everybody, we've got a recommendation to receive the curbside recycling audit trial report. Thank you, Lou. Thank you, Claire. All in favour? Carried. Okay, moving on to the district-wide water renewals. I see Jean's not here. Who would like, Paul, would you like to do this? No. I know you're not on the right team. So
I can
Dawn, if
speak to
that's
this
okay,
one,
thank
so-
you.
So this is one of our renewals contracts, and what happened is, as you will have read, there were a number of items which led to cost increases over time, all of them within budget, but the choice made to deliver those parts of the work through this particular contract that was not foreseen at time of letting. So seeking an increase to the approved contract sum to cover those items.
Thank you, Dawn. Any questions? Otherwise, I'll ask for a mover and a seconder. Take the report as read. So Bruce, you're happy to move? Yep. Graham's happy to second. All in favour? Carried. Excellent. Okay, next item is our cycleway bridges increase to approve the contract sum again.
Yep.
Brian, this one's yours.
Thank you very much. And I have got Paul there as well to answer any questions about the contract. But quite simply, we went out to tender to build the Mangapiko Stream Bridge on Haupo Road. And you'll see that bridge was lifted in by 2 cranes the other night. And Paul was out there in the middle of the night and took some good photographs. So we'll share those with you. But now it's just a matter of connecting up the footpaths at each end of that bridge to finish it off. So the original contract included that bridge and replacing the Chanel Place footbridge. And we put in a provisional sum within that contract with the expectation that we would replace one of the bridges within the Memorial Park. But when we came to the council, or to the chief executive to sign off the contract, because it was under the $1 million. We didn't have a budget for the Memorial Park at the time, so we weren't able to proceed with that within the contract. But now we are assured that the funding will be available, and we have started the process with the contractor, the same contractor, to do a design and deliver those next 2 bridges within the Memorial Park. And hence we want to increase the contract sum to cover those bridges.
Thanks, Brian. That's excellent news. Question, Claire?
I'm really commending staff on getting this project sort of pretty well done, which is fantastic. And lovely to see that more than one bridge is being, remediated or replaced. Yeah, because I know that there's been a lot of patience being exercised in the community waiting for it to happen. Also, under the sort of the legal and regulatory considerations or strategies and policies, I'd really love for it to be acknowledged that it aligns with our active modes of transport aims, and with the Pirongia Cycleway project as well, because eventually it will link up. That project group has sort of met monthly for about the last 5 years, and they do feel that they don't get much visibility around the council table, and the fact that the aims of that project are actually ticking all the boxes for getting people out and connecting people up, so that they don't have to rely on cars. So I just wanted to make that point. Thanks.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks for that point. Hey, and I also see in the resolution, the recommendation B, it says 80 instead of 80. So we'll make that minor amendment to the recommendation. Are there any other questions about this, Lou?
Thank you, Brian. That's great to see the Memorial Park is included. I just want to ask 1 or 2 quick questions. Are they going to lift the actual structure on Memorial Park with cranes? Because you've got a problem with trees and a lot of infrastructure to get around there. And I know both areas quite well. One's very wet and the other is actually quite difficult. Or are they going to construct on site? Do you know at all? Or that's in the future? Or
Yeah, I'm not sure, Paul. Have you had that discussion with the contractor? Yes. Do we know? Or
the contract preference is to build the bridges in the factory, whether they can control quality and compliance. They will be training for whether they get a massive crane and lift them over top of the trees, or they'll work that out with the
Thank you, Paul.
thank you very much.
Okay, everybody. So we have a recommendation there, just with that minor amendment. B, can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Thank you, Lou. Thank you, Alwyn. All in favour? Carried. Okay, we'll move on to the Karapiro 100K flyer. So these are our road closures. I think Julie is here. Okay. I suspect we will take the report as read, and we have a few here to do. Are there any queries about this particular event? Oh, that's excellent. Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Mike. All in favour? Carried. Okay, we'll move on to the Parongia Annual Craft Day. Again, another regular event on the Parongia calendar. Any questions? Claire is happy to move. Alwyn is happy to second again. All in favour? Carried. The Kairangi Hill Climb, again, a regular event that's on the calendar. Graham will be moving it. Bruce will be seconding it. All in favour? Carried. Excellent. So we'll move to public excluded. We just have the confirmation of the public excluded minutes from the 15th of June.
Yes. Those are coming up. That's just a social way of alerting people to those if they wanted to complain or wanted to.
We do send it through to comms, but I know Natalia is on maternity leave at the moment, so I'll mention that to Oscar as a way of like they go on the website at the moment, but that might be a more proactive way of getting them out to people.
We had a lot of messing done around the town problem and when I got ready, people went on, it was needing to know exactly what we're going.
Yeah,
Great.
I'll check that with comms and see if we can do that.
yep, yeah, that sounds good. Philip, do you have something?
Yep, thank you. Graham and Ellen might be able to comment more on this from the community board, but with the rural tour, I think wasn't there a suggestion of having toilets up in Kairangi? Is there can there be a temporary one up there for the day? Or
I don't know. I'm only involved in the actual road closure side of it. I'd have to check in with
It's probably something to raise with the event
We
organiser.
have told the Kairangi people where to go to see Kieran for some funding application to the community board or other areas. So that's what they're in the process of doing for. But they're looking for more permanent toilets rather than the temporary ones, yeah, which could be hooked into their sewage system there. So it's a good move. Yep.
Okay, thanks everyone. All right, can I have a move and a seconder to for the resolution to exclude the public, please? Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Mike.